Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Addie and today I'm going to be doing a recommendation video of fantasy reads to get you through the rest of the winter because I feel like fantasy is just such a winter genre and I have been in such a fantasy mood lately, so I have so many new fantasies to recommend from the last time I posted. So because it's all I've been reading. I'm so excited about it. Like, I was like a fantasy girl like when I was reading like in high school, and then a few years ago I just went through like this romance phase. Like, I was just all I wanted to read was romance for like a year and a half, and now I'm kind of like slowly getting back into my fantasy. But starting like of 2024, like I was just like, fantasy, that's all I want to read. So anyway, all that to say is I wanted to show you how to get through the rest of the winter. Also, it's been helping me like really romanticize winter because like living in Chicago, it's kind of rough sometimes, and like sometimes I need to like romanticize my life a little bit to get through the season, and fantasy definitely helps me do that. It makes me feel like definitely cozy. So all that to say is I will be giving you a bunch of fantasy recs. I'm gonna start with, it was actually the first book I read of the year, which is Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco, and let's just talk about the cover first off. Like, the Barnes & Noble edition like really popped off with this. This book is so good. So this book is kind of a spin-off of Kingdom of the Wicked, which I definitely recommend you read first, which also great fantasy series, but this one I like the most because it's definitely like it starts off as young adult with Kingdom of the Wicked, but it definitely veers off into like definitely new adult, so really just be aware of that. But this one is centered around the King of Envy and Camilla, and he's basically just playing a game. Like, he's involved in this game to save his court, and part of the game is that he needs Camilla to paint a painting for him, and she's refusing. She's like, I don't want to do it. He's like a prince of hell and she's just kind of a normal girl, and like she's like not putting up with his shit, and he doesn't really know what to do with it. So it's definitely an interesting story. I really loved it. I feel like the action was really good. It is definitely kind of like, this is pure romantasy. Like, if this is one of those where it's like, do not go into this for the plot, really. Like, the romance definitely takes the full front in this, but nonetheless I really do love it. Like, I love myself a romantasy. This is the exact opposite of that. Do not go in it for any like romance. There is the little smidgen of it, but definitely don't read it for that. This is all plot, no vibes. And it is the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. This is like the first high fantasy I've ever read, and I loved it. Like, that's kind of like my goal for the year, is getting into the Cosmere, and this is my first step into it, and this is where I decided to start, which I'm really glad I did. It's about this girl Vin, who's kind of like a street urchin. She's like really young, and it's hard to like kind of live on the streets, and one day in this society there's like Mistborn and like Mistings. Mistborn are the people that can burn like all 8 metals, and people who can burn metals are the ones who have abilities, and each metal is associated to that ability, and Mistborn can burn all 8. So then he recruits her to work together to overthrow like this lord ruler. He's kind of like immortal, like he's ruled for 1,000 years. No one's ever come close to like overthrowing him, but Kelsier gets together these group of people, including Vin, and who's the main character, and they work to overthrow the lord ruler. And this book is so good. Definitely recommend these. And if you want to get into the Cosmere, this is how I'd recommend starting. The next book I want to recommend is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Also, like, this cover, like, this is gorgeous. This book isn't really, it's kind of like historical fantasy. This is very different from the other two too. It's about this girl, Addie, who is, I think it's like the 1700s or something, and she makes a deal with the devil to live forever. But the problem is that no one remembers her. Like, anyone she meets doesn't remember her. So she has to live this like immortal life with no recognition from anyone. And I like, this book is super lyrical. It's super lyrical writing. It's not very fast paced, but I think it's really beautiful writing. So that's why I'm recommending this. It's not like a high stakes fantasy, but it's like a beautiful fantasy, and I loved it. The next book I want to recommend is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, and this is like the cozy fantasy. Like this is what I would recommend if you just want any cozy fantasy. It has everything. If you want anything to happen in the book you're reading, don't read this. I'm gonna put it out right now, you're gonna be bored. But I really enjoyed it. I just thought it was so like comforting to read. I read it in the middle of final season of last year, and honestly it was just what I needed. I needed to not be stressed. I needed to just like have happy vibes and read about some fae and who stole half her soul. And that's basically what it is. It's about this girl, Dora, who like is kind of odd. It has romance in it, which is really fun. But when she was young, her half of her soul got stolen by a fae, so it just leaves her kind of weird. But she's like working to get her soul back. Yeah, I really love this book. It's so comforting and so cozy and warm, so definitely recommend this. There's also another one. There's two other books, 10,000 Stitches, which I've read and I really like that one as well, and the last one I have not read, but I'm really excited about it. The next book I have is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. I had like never really heard anyone talking about this, but it got recommended to me in Barnes when I was probably like 16 years old, and I bought it and I never read it until like last year, and it's been sitting on my TBR for so long. And you know, like one of those books that have just been sitting on your TBR for so long and you finally pick it up and read it? That's this one. And it's like so good, and you're like, it's just been sitting there. I loved this book. It's so dark and like eerie and unsettling, and it's so good. Like, I think it's fantasy. It definitely is fantasy, but it's about these these three sisters who, when they're really young, get kidnapped and get taken to like this, no one really knows what happened to them, and they don't remember what happened to them, but they came back and they're like weird. Like their hair color is different, their eye color is different, but like it's them, but they look weird and they act weird, and it's all just weird, but it's great. It's just so unsettling. Like, you feel so off the entire time. I loved it. Like, I ate this book up. It's also really short. Same thing with Half a Soul. Like, if you want just a quick fantasy, it's also a standalone, which is great. I love standalone fantasies because sometimes you just don't want to read a full series. So definitely read this. This is fall and winter vibes. I completely. I would actually, this around Halloween is great. So if you want to wait till then too, but amazing. Love this book. Next book I have is another cozy fantasy, and it is Legends and Lattes, and by Travis Beldry. This is not my favorite cozy fantasy, but like it was great when like the mood strikes, you know? Like, it's, what I really thought was interesting about it was it takes place for this character like after what a normal fantasy book would be. Like, the events that precede this book are usually the events that are written about in fantasy books, but like fantasy books usually end, it's like, oh, everything's great, everything's good, but it's like what happens afterwards, and that's what exactly this is. She goes through all these high stakes, these crazy adventures, and then she's like, you know what, I want to open a coffee shop, and then she does, and she's an orc there. I think it's an orc, which is super cool because I love Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, so loving the orc vibes. But anyway, so it was just so, that's literally what it is though. It's like, just this orc opens a coffee shop and then she runs the coffee shop, and that's what happens, and it's so good. I really liked it. It's not like, I like Half a Soul better for like cozy fantasy genre, but still a great book. The next book I wanted to recommend was The Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent, because I love Carissa Broadbent with my entire soul. Like, she is up there. My favorite author of all time is Sarah J Maas. She is right there up with her, like really close. Something about her books do it for me. Like, especially, so this is like, The Serpent That Wings of the Night is definitely more of her mainstream book, but this is my favorite by her. This series is so unmatched for me. Like, I think back of when I read this and I just get nostalgic. Like, I would pay so much money to read this book again. And I read it around the winter. Actually, I think I read it around this time last year, and it was the perfect time to read it. Like, I don't know if, like, maybe I should reread it and like figure out if it was just for the vibes, but something about this in the winter last year was so good. It's about this girl, Tasana, who who's always been a slave, and she has like small abilities, but when she escapes and she flees and pledges herself to this place called the Orders, which she's always had like these really like high expectations of them. Like she admires them. She like has always thought like if I could just get to them, they'll help me. And she does get to them, but she has to earn her place within the Orders. So she takes on an apprenticeship with Max. He doesn't really want to. He doesn't really like the Orders. He's not really into it. So, but eventually he does it, and she's like learns to harness her magic and earn her place to save the people that she loves back home. It's just so good. Max is one of my favorite book boyfriends. He's so good. He's just a sweetie. Like I feel like you never get like that many like just sweethearts in fantasy. Like it's always like the broody grumpy guy, but he's just like sweet. I think what I like about her too is she has like the perfect blend of fantasy and romance. Like so I don't like when it veers too much fantasy, and I mean I do like it when I'm reading a fantasy and I get fantasy, but like in romantasy I want the nice blend, you know, and she has mastered this equation. Like it's so good. So love this book. And as you probably guess, even though I like The Daughter of No Worlds better, I still want to recommend The Serpent, the Wings of the Night, because I love this series too. Like, God, I love this series. It's a duology right now, and there's a novella in between, but I think it's gonna be 6 books in total of like 3 duologies, if I understand correctly. But I am literally foaming at the mouth for the next one. This one is more vampires. This one it's kind of Hunger Games vibes. Like she grows up around vampires, but she is human. So, but the only chance of like becoming more powerful is to enter this like deadly competition, and if you win it, you get to like wish anything from the goddess of death. But like she has to like she's a human amidst like all these super powerful vampires, and she is like, even though she was raised by the vampire king, like she's still a human. But then she meets this guy Rain, who is great, and he's her enemy because he defies her father, but she creates a weird like alliance with him, and like they're forced to work together. But she's also like, I do not trust you at all because you literally like outwardly hate my father. And he's like, no, let's work together. So it's great though. And yeah, I really like this. I think I'm not huge on vampires. Like I don't like dislike them. Like I like, but like they're not my favorite. Love this book, definitely recommend it. The last book I want to recommend is Once Upon a Broken Heart. This book has all of my heart. I wanted to end with this one because nothing has ever made me feel the way that this book has made me feel. Like I get like the happy butterfly feelings as I got when I was like little watching a Disney movie. Like that kind of nostalgic fairy tale-esque feel. And this trilogy is just one of my favorite books of all time. They're so good. They're so whimsical. The writing is beautiful, but it's also such a great introduction to fantasy if like you don't really know where to start. It's about this girl Evangeline. When the love of her life is said to marry another, she calls on Jax, who's the Prince of Hearts, and she's like, I want my man back. And so she strikes a deal with him, and in exchange for that, she has to give him 3 kisses at any point of his choosing. But she learns that he has more plans for her than she fully anticipated, and he's a little bit more dangerous than she originally bargained for. And I just love this book. Definitely recommend it. If you're starting with fantasy, definitely start here. So those are all the books I have. I hope you guys enjoyed. I tried to have like a mix of a lot of different kinds of fantasies, so hopefully there's something for everyone in there. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope they help you get through the rest of the winter season, and I will see you guys next week.